Hello and welcome to Picking Principles. I had a request from Saul Lopez for some information on lockpicking in general. And I thought, there's so many videos out there and they're so well done, I probably shouldn't do it. But since he asked, I'm going to try and cover the basics. And when I sat down to plan this video, I came across, 6 or 7 different categories. So I'm going to try and make one video and I'll put some bookmarks in there so we can see the different categories. So let's begin with a padlock. And this is an acrylic padlock. It is a training padlock because it lets you see what's going on. And this is probably the most standard type of padlock you're going to find, at least in North America. It's a pin tumbler padlock. The reason it's called that is because there are a whole bunch of pins along the top here that are being pushed down by springs. And there are little pins inside here. Now, these are called the driver pins. I don't actually know why they're called driver pins. And inside of this part of the lock right here, which is called the core, some people call it the Bible, that's the part the key gets inserted into, there are other pins. And that's what these bumps, called teeth or ridges, are going to push up on. And they push up on other pins in there called key pins, which then go up to something called a shear line, which is very difficult to see in this lock. And that allows the lock to turn because it pushes the key pins, the driver pins, out of the lock because they're currently sitting inside the lock right now. So once I push in the key, it pushes up those driver pins, gets them outside of the Bible, and allows the lock to spin. And then, of course, it pops. And we can see a locking mechanism here. It's a spring-loaded locking pawl. Now, those are pretty insecure, and a lot of people have demonstrated that by applying a little bit of shock and pulling on the shackle, you can get this spring, because of inertia, to compress and pull the lock out. Now, I can probably do it with this, but a lot of times you'll just use a bump hammer, or if you watch McNally, he'll use a lock of the identical type a lot of times and just hit it. So you'll use 2 locks to open 1 lock. It's pretty interesting. Now, this is obviously just a training lock. It's acrylic. It's really great because it lets you see inside, but it's pretty low quality. The materials are low quality. The tolerances are really poor. And what that means is that things don't fit together really well. So an example of a much better built lock that's of the same style, another pin tumbler lock, would be something like, and I know I said better build quality, and I'm showing a master, which is a bit of a joke in the lockpicking community because master locks tend to not be very good. But this is one of my favorite locks. It is a pin tumbler lock. You can tell by the key, excuse me, because all pin tumbler locks will have the same style key right up here called the bitting, B-I-T-T-I-N-G, bitting. While we're looking at the key, we might as well talk about the parts. The part that your finger holds, like the head of the key or the bow, this part here, this entire part is called the blade. And then up here with the notches and the ridges, a notch would be dug in and a ridge would be bumping out. That is the bitting. Now, when I first started, I couldn't tell if a lock had 3 pins, 4 pins, 5 pins, or 6 pins. That's pretty much the standard amount. You can get some high pin count locks, but standard pin tumbler locks will have 5 or 6. You can, of course, get locks of different sizes. Here's a little luggage lock. You can see compared to this lock, it's quite small. It's another master. And this probably has 3 pins. I don't remember, 3 or 4. Anyway, I'll get into that a little bit more later. And this operates the same way. It's a standard pin tumbler lock. Now, this one has a different locking mechanism. You can see inside, possibly. Okay, you can't really see it very well, but when you look in there, you can see that there's a ball bearing, and that ball bearing will slide into the notch on the shackle of the lock, which makes it more difficult to shim. Shim means to take something and shove it. This is a shim that you go in your core for later, but they also have shims that people make out of pop cans or a variety of things. And basically you would just shove this in between the shackle of the lock and the locking pawl, and it basically would just push it back because it'll slide inside. And once it does, it'll push that locking pawl out of the way. or it'll cover up the little notch in the shackle, allowing you to get in between and then just pull it open. This isn't the proper kind of shim for shimming a lock though. It's for working on when you disassemble a lock and pull the core out and try to repin it. All right, so that's one type of lock. That's a pin tumbler lock, the most common type here in North America anyway, and they all have the bumpy key like this with the different bitting. All right, another type of lock that you'll see, let's see, here's another acrylic training lock. This is a dimple lock, or sorry, a tubular lock, sorry. And you can see that it's also got bitting. You can see the different cuts in it right here. And you can count, oh, that's what I was getting at. You can tell how many pins there are by counting basically the landings. So this would be one landing right here. So this is the shoulder. And as soon as you get past the shoulder, you look for the different landings. There's 1, 2, there's a third landing, 4, 5. So this key would open a 5-pin lock. Let's see, a different one. This one's got a really long shoulder, but right up here, there's also a little cut. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-pin lock. And then we end, of course, at the tip of the key, and that's for key control right there. That groove lets you slide it in. So it's difficult sometimes to tell. All right, getting back to this. This is a tubular lock, and it works on a completely different principle, or disc detainer. Oh my, I keep screwing things up. This is a disc detainer lock, and there are a whole bunch of little discs in here. And what this does is it goes in and rotates those discs into position. And then once they do, you can see the little notches on the top of those discs right there. And that's where the key is grabbing them and spinning them. You see them moving? The one right at the beginning here, and then about 4 in are moving the most. And that's because these key cuts are not as deep. And there's something called a sidebar in there. And once all these things move into the right position, then the sidebar can fall. There's the sidebar. It's sticking out right now. Once I slide this, then the sidebar can fall. Once the sidebar falls, then that ball bearing can drop. Otherwise, it's in the way and it won't open. But once the sidebar gets out of the way, this can turn. This little notch allows the ball bearing to fall into that space, and the lock slides open. Okay, so in practice, there are a bunch of disc detainer locks. Now, you want to learn about disc detainer locks. My recommendation would be that you go visit Lockchuck. Here's a disc detainer lock in practice. It's a big, heavy one. And you can see that it's got the same style key, not very good bitting. And by that, I mean not a lot of cuts of different heights. So that's a pretty cheap disc detainer lock. I think I've got another one lying around here. I'm sure I do, but I don't see it off the top of my head. Now, in order to open those, that requires a specialty tool. And this is a really cheap, I think it was $10, $15. I got it off of, I don't know, AliExpress probably. And this goes in, and this is what you use in order to, let me get a nice close-up for you. That tip right here is what you would use instead of the key to grab onto each of those discs, and you twist them. And this is used with this portion right here at the end to tension the lock, because if you don't, it puts the twist on the lock in order to be able to open the lock. So that's one, that's a disc detainer tool. Again, go see Lockchuck, watch his videos. He's got a bunch of different kinds for a variety of different disc detainer locks, front tensioning or rear tensioning. And his channel's great and explains it all really well. I've shown you a standard pin tumbler. These also are standard pin tumbler locks, but you'll notice that it's different than what you might find in a doorknob. So this is the kind of lock that you would find in a doorknob. They call this a KIK, K-I-K, stands for key in knob, and it's just a standard pin tumbler lock. You might find something like this inside, a deadbolt. It might be sitting in a thing like this. It sits in nice and flat, goes on the door, operates a deadbolt. Okay, it's just another standard pin tumbler though. Nothing special about it. When I first started, I didn't know the difference between just a cylinder lock like this or something like this. I believe this is a different kind. It's got these little screw holes in here. I think they call this a mortise lock. Okay, and it fits into a mortise in a door. And this is another door lock. You could also find it inside something like this, but it's probably going to be in a handle or right above the door handle. Specialty type here. This is a smart key system. You can tell by that little hole. And it's got different things in here. It's actually got sliders. So instead of having pin tumbler, this has got little sliders. And what they do is they slide up and down, kind of like the pins would in a lock, but there's a little sidebar, just like there was in the disc detainer lock. And then that sidebar will slide in and allow the cylinder to rotate in the lock body and thereby open your lock. All right, feel free to slow this down and watch it as many times as you need. I know I'm going through quite a bit and probably pretty quickly. So I've gone through the pin tumbler and where you might locate them in the doors. I've also shown you the disc detainer. I don't have a warded lock to show you, at least not together, but you can go back to some of my really early videos and see it. You've probably seen these warded padlocks before. They're like laminated padlocks. And they're pretty interesting in that there's no core or pins or anything. Instead, there's just like plates of steel, and the plates of steel will allow the tip of the key to get all the way to the back and access basically a little spring-loaded locking mechanism. But depending on where the plates of steel are located, the key will fit in around those plates of steel. And then the tip just gets to the back and accesses the lock. So you can file all this right off and just put the blade in, file off all this. I guess you would still call it bitting, and just leave the tip, and it would work on just about any warded lock. In fact, they have keys. Let's see if I've got some around that are warded lock keys. They're kind of like skeleton keys that will work in a variety of warded locks. So here's a little warded lock pick set. It was also pretty cheap. I don't remember what it cost. And they come in a variety of different little profiles. This one's probably the most useful because, it's not going to bump into anything, and it's just going to try to get to the back of the lock and twist it. And it works in stuff like this, which is not strictly speaking a warded lock. It does have warding, but it's also got little levers. So it's kind of a cross. This kind of lock is a cross between a warded lock and a lever lock. I haven't talked about lever locks yet. So it'll go in and it'll push on some little springs, some little spring-loaded plates. Again, these are really simple to pick. All you need is a wire basically, and you get in there and you start pulling on them, on those plates. Helps when you put your key in the right way. And you can see that those little tips on the key, the bitting, if you will, pushes on some spring-loaded plates and gets those out of the way. This is really similar to the way that a true lever lock will work. And for a lot more information on lever locks, including great views inside and explanations, I would recommend you check out Brummy Lockpicker. Go to his channel and you can see a bunch of stuff like that. But anyhow, these will work inside of there as well. But really they're better on regular warded locks. I'm afraid I don't have one to show you, unfortunately. Okay, so there are also two other kinds of locks. Tubular, which I've mentioned, and I think I accidentally called one tubular a moment ago. Let me show you what that looks like. I happen to have an acrylic tubular lock. You've probably seen these around. They look really fancy and high security. They're the ones that the key is like a open tube. The bitting on these are cut into the side. So this is probably for key control, but also could be for tensioning. And here are the little cuts. And you can see they go into different depths. And this is just like a standard pin tumbler lock, except they're arranged in a circle. So your key has to line up with the notch. That's the key control part. And then when you push the key in, all it does is, this little crack right here is the shear line. All it does is push individual pins in by different amounts. and allows you to then spin it. It pushes the driver pins out of this part into the back part, holds the key pins at the right depth, and allows this to spin. So you've probably seen these before. They're pretty cool. I like them quite a bit. They're actually pretty easy to pick. They just require a little bit of patience. There's different tools you would use for that, but let's see if we can find a dimple lock, an actual real dimple lock. Oh, here's one. I'm sure I have a key for it somewhere. Maybe I don't remember. You'll find this in some filing cabinets, or you'll find them in vending machines a lot of times. And I've marked off some little spots here that show where the different pins are. So when I'm going around to pick it, I can just, know where they're located. I'll show you a couple tools that are used for these. So if you've watched my channel at all, you've seen me use something called the Mantis. It's a really tiny thing that kind of fits around the circle and locks, but it hurts your fingers. I've recently purchased the Goat. You can see that symbol right there, that keyhole symbol. That just tells you that Sparrow's made this. I've never had the opportunity to use it yet, but the foot will go in here, and then this little pointy part here should grab on and allow you to put some tension on the lock. It may be too big for this lock. So I'll have to use the other side. Again, foot goes in there, this goes on here, grabs on, and allows you to apply tension. So I like this one in theory better. I've never used it just because it's a little wider and it's not as sharp. So it should be easier to hold on to and easier to use. So yeah, can certainly apply tension on there. It doesn't slip, so that's pretty good. I wonder if it works the other way. No, it does not. So the square part goes in the notch, and then you just angle it a little bit and apply some tension. And then you would just use anything. I took like a picture frame holder. A lot of people use a broken pick. All you need is a flat piece of steel, really. Anything that's small enough to fit in there and push on those individual pins. Keep applying tension. Just go around and around and around, and eventually you'll get it open. The trick with these is that once you slide this over to here, oftentimes you'll have to keep on picking it in order to get it to rotate. Now there's a much easier way to do it as well. There are specialty tools. They don't always work, but I happen to have purchased a set, and again, they were quite cheap. And one of my more popular videos shows me opening up a vending machine for a friend who didn't have his key. And it's basically like a key impressioning tool. So all these little fingers are at the very tip. Well, maybe they're not right now. So you can use this to just slide them to the tip. And what you do is you line up that post with the notch. This doesn't happen to be the right size, but my kit came with 3 different sizes, so one of them will probably work. And then you just slide it in, jiggle it around so the fingers go to the right depth, and boom, it slides right open. Super easy, very low skill. Watch my video on me opening a vending machine and you'll see exactly what I mean. Opens surprisingly quickly. So that's a tubular lock. And the last kind I want to show you, I'm afraid I don't have an acrylic version to show you, but this right here is a dimple lock. I believe I got this one from my friend Nigby, also great channel and great guy. And you can see that the key looks quite a bit different. It's called a dimple lock because there's little depressions in the key, or dimples. And so that would be the bitting for these. So also different than a standard lock, these will always be oriented sideways compared to where the pins are located. So this appears to be a 6-pin lock. You can see that there are 6 plugs at the top here that are holding the springs in, pushing the driver pins down. And then you access it with key pins as well. And if I were to look at the key, I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different depressions of varying depths. So that's the bitting on this key. So these go in sideways. They operate normally very smoothly. They're very nice locks. And they require a little bit of a different way to pick. And so let me show you some picking tools for those. You can get Well, here's an example of what not to buy. So before I do that, so I purchased this. I quite like it. It wasn't very expensive either. It's a Huck tubular set. And these picks have different profiles. That means they have different thicknesses and different curves in different parts of the head. And you basically go in and you would lift these pins up one at a time. Again, you need to tension. I'm surprised there's not a tensioning tool in here. I'll go through tensioning tools a little bit later. But just to illustrate the different sizes. So see the different sizes in those tips and the different curves. These both happen to curve right. Let's call those left. And then I have identical ones and they curve in the other direction. So depending on whether you want to tension something clockwise or counterclockwise, or if you need to pick it up or pick it down and get over the warding. These little grooves in the key slot, those are for key control, but they're also called warding, and you've got to get around them. So sometimes your pick has to go in and get around them. There's a whole bunch of different styles to these as well. You find those a lot more on standard pin tumbler locks, where they have different shapes. You'll often hear people talk about a Yale keyway. I don't think I've got anything right now that's out that has a Yale keyway, or they'll talk about being wide open. You can drive a truck in through it. So depending on how curvy this is or how narrow this is, that'll make it more difficult to pick. That's the keyway. Something that's a Yale style keyway, and I'm sorry I don't have anything like it right now. Oftentimes what they'll have at the top is, see, this is also pretty standard and straight. People will call that paracentric. It'll be curved, so your key will have like a curve in it, and that makes it much more difficult to get your pick in there in order to access the keyway and access the pins. Okay, so that's a good place to leave off of the different lock types. I've shown you pin tumbler, dimple, warded, disc detainer, tubular. Oh, and I think I talked about sliders. Yeah, I did. Sliders inside here. Interestingly, this dimple lock, also from Nigby, you can see by the key, has the dimple cuts along the top, but it also has this groove right here. And what that does is it picks up some sliders that are hiding inside of this lock as well. So that's kind of got like double security. So it's a pretty cool lock, makes it a little bit more challenging to pick and a little bit more secure. Oh, did I talk about these? Yeah, this is also going to be, this is a wafer lock. So I guess there was one more kind. So these are reversible keys. You can put them in this way. This is a cabinet lock, and that'll open it. And if I pull the key out and spin the key around and put it in, you see it still operates. That's just because there's some spring-loaded wafers in here that have to get out of the way. And there might be some on both sides, or there might be some on one side only. And the reason they would make it on a key that has double-sided like this, like for instance, your car key. You can often put your car key in the door or the ignition upside down, and it'll still operate. And that's the same style as this. It's a wafer lock, which are also pretty easy to pick. And they sell specialty picks for those as well. So I've got this clom set of those, which I bought. I don't have a lot of opportunity to use it because there's not a lot of locks like that because they're really not very secure. Of course, you could use it on ignitions, but they all have electronic ignition locks now too. So you can see different profiles. So you would take something like this and slide it in and wiggle it around. And hopefully at some point you can get lucky enough to open it up. Now I don't have a tensioner in here, so that's gonna make it a little bit more difficult to open. And maybe that's the wrong profile. You know, maybe it needs something more like this, I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. This isn't a picking video, it's a terminology video. And it's running really long. Again, feel free to just watch the part you're interested in. I can put these tools away later. And skim through section to section, rewatch as much as you need. Oh, what did I do? There we go. Okay, so that's lock types. Maybe at this point, it's a good idea to pause the video or stop the video, and I'll come back with some more stuff on the different pins and pin types, some different tools, look at different picks and hooks types, and some disassembly tools. I've already shown you some different picks that you would use for different locks, but maybe the next video we'll call it a part 2. It's going to show some of those. So, thanks for watching. I hope you learned a little bit and found this enjoyable, and please stay tuned for part 2 coming up soon. Thanks everybody, have a great day.